Tonight, a surprise flight to Florida. The Prime Minister touches down for a meeting with the U.S. President-elect.
It's extremely encouraging that Trump is willing to give over his Friday evening to Canada.
The two leaders face to face for the first time since Donald Trump's tariff threat. Searching for Black Friday deals as shoppers struggle with the cost of living.
I bought slippers that were $95. I paid $67.
Plus, inside the cockpit moments before an emergency landing at a Montreal airport. Also, two Canadians accused of a serious crime linked to the victim through an online video game.
It's really one of the strangest cases I've ever seen.
And a remarkable restoration.
It will be a great moment for France.
A first look inside Notre Dame 5 years after a devastating fire.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. We begin with breaking news. The Prime Minister has made a surprise visit to Florida to meet with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Justin Trudeau and his security detail were spotted at a hotel in West Palm Beach before traveling to Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate for dinner. It all comes just days after Trump's threat to impose sweeping tariffs on Canada. CTV's chief political correspondent Vashi Kapelos joins me now with more. And Vashi, the Prime Minister's office provided no advance notice about this meeting. So what do we know at this point?
Yeah, and that's a really rare thing, Heather. I've been covering this government since day one. I cannot remember an official trip that the Prime Minister took that we didn't know about or that journalists couldn't kind of, travel alongside to cover. So we're getting these details as they are coming out to us. I think the top line information here is that the dinner started at Mar-a-Lago just before 7:30 Eastern time this evening. Traveling alongside the Prime Minister is Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc. A lot of that must have to do with the border, which is, of course, what Donald Trump cited in that social media post earlier this week in which he threatened to levy these tariffs on Canadian imports. We've got the Chief of Staff for the Prime Minister, and alongside incoming President Trump, Governor Doug Burgum, who is his nomination for Interior Secretary, also looking to be the kind of energy czar for Donald Trump. Howard Lutnick, who is Donald Trump's nominee for Commerce Secretary, and Mike Waltz, who is the National Security Advisor nominee for Donald Trump. Gives you an idea that border security will be a focal point of the conversation, Heather.
All right. And Vashi, Trudeau said earlier today he believes Trump's tariff threat should be taken seriously. So what's Ottawa's game plan here?
I think exactly that, Heather. I think there was a very distinct message in what the Prime Minister conveyed today, that even though the speculation is this is a negotiating tactic from the incoming president, that the government and other governments across the country are taking the threat of these tariffs very seriously, because the simple reason is they would most certainly cause a recession in this country. He's there to convey that to the president, I am told. What comes of it? Well, that's another story. Heather.
Vashi, thank you for this. Always appreciate the insight. Earlier today, the Prime Minister was in Prince Edward Island touting the Liberals' newly passed legislation to bring in a 2-month GST holiday starting December 14th. But whether or not Canadians will get those $250 checks in the new year is still very much up for debate. Here's CTV's Jeremy Charon.
At the King Eddie in Ottawa, there is hope a GST holiday could help boost business.
I think for us it's a welcome break. And it's great to see our customers that, the price they're going to see on the menu is a price they'll pay.
The first half of Ottawa's affordability package has now passed in the House of Commons.
That's going to make a real difference on groceries, on restaurants, on toys, on kids' clothes, on so many of the things that as families we know add up really, really quickly.
The question now is, what about the rest of the Liberals' plan?
We're going to continue to work with all members of Parliament to support hardworking Canadians, to support Canadians with their affordability challenges.
They've proposed sending $250 rebate checks to more than 18 million working Canadians. But as it stands, the Liberals don't have the support they need to pass it, with both the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois criticizing it. And now the NDP wants to expand the rebate to non-working seniors, students, and people with disabilities.
I would like to see them reconsider and give it to pensioners.
We're focused on specifically helping hardworking Canadians who worked last year, who need some extra support.
Right now, sending those rebates would cost nearly $4.7 billion, and expanding eligibility could cost billions more. The policy is sparking concerns from some economists about what it could mean for Canada's bottom line.
The Canadian economy really doesn't need additional fiscal stimulus, and there's always that risk of what it will do to inflation and hence monetary policy.
The GST bill is now off to the Senate, where it needs to pass before its planned rollout just weeks from now. As for the rebate checks, it's not clear when or how the Liberals might try and push it through the House of Commons. Heather?
Jeremy, thank you. Canada's economy grew at an annual rate of 1% in the third quarter, driven by an increase in household and government spending, something store owners hope will continue on this Black Friday and through the holiday season. But as CTV's Adrian Gobriel reports, some analysts are expecting a more modest turnout.
Mayhem, money, and manic shoppers have been historic hallmarks of Black Friday south of the border. For some tripping over themselves, desperate for a deal. This year in parts of Canada, things are more subdued.
I got here at 6:57 expecting about 300 people, but it was empty. There was no one here.
Retail analysts are blaming the sluggish turnouts on a number of factors.
You look at interest rates, they haven't quite come down yet. There's geopolitical issues, unemployment, and people are just really watching their money this year.
Now it's a different story at this outlet mall in Niagara Falls near the U.S. border. It's absolutely packed. As you can see here, it's sidewalk parking only, with some coming north to flex their U.S. dollar on Canadian soil.
I'm from Wheatfield, New York, and with the exchange at 43 cents to the dollar, it's worth shopping here.
You get the Black Friday discount, and then you get the exchange rate discount. Sweet deal.
Yes, I bought slippers that were $95. I paid $67. Right away it gives me what it was charged in American, so that's a really good deal.
As of this evening, the loonie was hovering around 71 cents, which in turn has some Canadian Black Friday shoppers sticking closer to home.
We used to go to the States. We used to go to Erie because of the tax break, but now it's just with the dollar like it is, it's not worth going. I'd rather shop in Canada.
The Retail Council of Canada expects the average Canadian to spend $972 this holiday season, with 40% of that spent on Black Friday. For those who braved the shopping elements, it was a day well spent. You're literally stuffing your bag till they break today.
I was. It was fantastic. We had a great day, though. Everybody was so nice.
Those we spoke with are well aware of the GST tax break likely to kick in by mid-December, though many aren't willing to wait around, worried that the items at the top of their wish lists may disappear. Heather?
All right, Adrian, thanks. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is alerting consumers about a recall on cucumbers due to a possible salmonella contamination. Arizona-based Sunfed Produce issued a recall on whole, fresh American cucumbers that come in cardboard containers or black plastic crates. They were linked to salmonella cases in the U.S. between mid-October and mid-November. The cucumbers were also sold in Alberta, BC, Ontario, and Saskatchewan. There are new details about the emergency landing of a Boeing 737 at Mirabel Airport in Quebec, including communication issues with the control tower. Passenger video shows sparks from the engine scraping the runway as it landed. At one point, the pilot asks if the control tower can see smoke. The answer, affirmative, but no flames. The airline, Nolanor, says all 87 passengers and 7 crew members got out safely with no reported injuries. The crew had declared an in-flight emergency on its way from Quebec City to Newfoundland, which diverted the plane. But the control tower wasn't told about the mechanical issue and didn't have emergency vehicles standing by. The crew also didn't request any because they thought it was a more minor flap issue. The Transportation Safety Board is investigating and says the left main landing gear collapsed until the left engine touched the ground. Montreal news outlet La Presse says one of its reporters was the subject of a murder plot. It says in 2021, convicted killer Frédéric Silva offered up $100,000 for the assassination, but it was never carried out. The target, investigative reporter Danielle Renaud, who at the time was covering Silva's murder trial. La Presse says Silva later became a police informant and confessed about issuing the contract. Prosecutors in California believe a Canadian man's alleged obsession with a woman he met through online gaming was the motive for attempted murder. Investigators claim the Canadian, along with an accomplice, flew to the United States to show up at the woman's home. Here's CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson.
One of the two Canadians accused of carrying out a violent and bizarre attack in California appears in court. The other still in hospital, recovering from stab wounds. Police say days earlier, Darius White and Devin Vanderhoff, both 25, flew to Monterey County from Vancouver to show up at the home of a woman Vanderhoff knew through online gaming. Police claim over a period of years he had become obsessed with her.
It's really one of the strangest cases I've ever seen. Guys coming from Vancouver to Salinas to pose as an Amazon delivery person and stab somebody. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Investigators say Vanderhoff was carrying a package that contained handcuffs, knives, and duct tape. He knocked on the door. The woman's boyfriend answered. Police say Vanderhoff stabbed him. The woman came to her partner's defense and stabbed Vanderhoff. Then he allegedly stabbed and strangled her.
Some of the parties involved did receive some pretty serious injuries.
Neighbors heard cries for help, called 911, and Vanderhoff was arrested. Darius White, meanwhile, was questioned by police at the scene and released, then taken into custody the next day.
My understanding is that he was on board the plane and the plane was preparing to leave. It was a connecting flight that was heading back to Canada.
Global Affairs Canada tells CTV it is aware of the detention of two Canadian citizens in the United States. Consular officials are providing assistance and are in contact with local authorities. Once Devin Vanderhoff is released from the hospital, both he and Darius White are expected in court on Monday. If convicted, they could face 25 years to life in prison. Heather.
CTV's Andrew Johnson. A decision by Canada's top court paves the way for a potential class action lawsuit against the makers of opioid drugs. The Supreme Court today upheld a law in British Columbia that would allow the province to pursue a lawsuit on behalf of other provinces, territories, and the federal government. Several drug companies argued the law oversteps provincial authority. The top court disagreed. A high-profile name embroiled in the drone spying scandal that hit Canada Soccer at the Paris Olympics has resigned as head coach of Toronto FC. John Herdman joined the club last year after coaching stints with both the men's and women's national teams. Herdman did not participate in a third-party review of allegations this summer about the inappropriate use of drones by the national team staff. The women's coach, Bev Priestman, was fired earlier this month after the review. Coming up, a look inside the world's toughest prison.
You know, it's a combustible mix.
Why this Syrian prison is considered a global security threat for terrorism. Plus, the heart of Paris revived. Notre Dame is set to reopen years after a devastating fire. At least 9 Canadians are among thousands of suspected ISIS members being held in makeshift prisons across Syria. Kurdish authorities in charge of keeping them behind bars are pleading with their home countries to take them back. And as W5's Avery Haynes reveals, counter-terrorism experts are warning of a ticking time bomb.
It's considered the toughest prison in the world, and we've been given rare access.
There are 4,000 prisoners here, most of them foreigners. Not one of them has been charged or stood trial for their alleged crimes.
And that's because there's no process to charge or try foreign detainees. The only way they'll be brought to justice, this prison official tells me, is if they're returned to their home countries.
We are bearing a significant amount of responsibility and burden. We urge each country to take back their citizens.
There are at least 9 Canadian men being held in dozens of prisons across northeast Syria in conditions described as inhumane and rife with disease by human rights groups, and a ticking time bomb by counterterrorism experts.
Hello. Does anyone speak English?
Ibrahim Aguid is a British medical student who's been locked up here for 5.5 years with no access to a lawyer.
You know, there's a real concern about so many people being in a cell with radicalization.
Of course, yeah, there's many different types of people from many different countries. You know, it's a combustible mix.
It's not just radicalization, it's prison breaks. In 2022, ISIS orchestrated a massive and sophisticated assault on this prison. It took Kurdish forces 9 days to regain control with the help of U.S. airstrikes. More than 150 Kurdish soldiers were killed in the battle, and 400 prisoners escaped, including suspected high-ranking fighters. Leaving foreign prisoners here is a global security threat, according to Ian Moss with the U.S. Bureau of Counterterrorism.
10,000 ISIS fighters remain in custody there. This is the largest concentration of detained terrorists anywhere in the world. If they escape, they will pose a threat not only to northeast Syria, but they'll also pose a threat to our homelands.
We're joining Kurdish forces as they hunt ISIS sleeper cells, an underground network that has its sights set on liberating the prisons. In recent raids, they've seized assault weapons, ammo, suicide vests. This field commander warns that ISIS sees the prisoners as a ready-made army.
The sleeper cells of ISIS are actively working to free their captured leaders in order to regain strength.
The U.S. government has repatriated all 27 of its male prisoners, 10 of whom face terror charges on their return. Other countries, including Canada, are being urged to do the same. Ilham Ahmed is one of the most powerful women in northeast Syria. The Kurdish politician says countries have an obligation to take their citizens home.
Canada has not responded to our request to take back its people, and we're unaware of the reasons for this delay.
Sally Lane's son, Jack, has been detained without charge for 7.5 years. Her life is consumed with fighting for his repatriation to Canada.
I think most mothers would do the same.
Sally says the only way this country can uphold the concept of innocent until proven guilty is to bring her son home, even if it's to stand trial.
I just want people to have an open mind. They can have as many questions as they want. What did he do? What didn't he do? They're the same questions I have. I want to know.
And Avery tracked down another Canadian, a confessed ISIS sniper who has an ominous warning about the future. You can watch her full documentary on Avery Haynes Investigates tomorrow night at 7 on CTV. And to a deepening crisis in the war-torn country. In a major blow to government forces in Syria, rebel fighters have breached its largest city for the first time in 8 years. Insurgents entered Aleppo in a surprise offensive against the Syrian military and its Russian allies. This has raised fears of an escalation in the long-running civil war. More than 500,000 people have been killed in the conflict that erupted in 2011. Georgia has been rocked by protests after the government suspended its bid to join the European Union. Thousands hit the streets in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, some hurling fireworks at police officers as they used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the crowds. The aim of an EU membership is enshrined in Georgia's constitution and has widespread support from its citizens. Still ahead tonight, why customers need to pass a military checkpoint to sip drinks at a new Starbucks location. Parts of the country are dealing with some messy winter weather. Thousands in the Maritimes were without power today after their first winter storm of the season. Meanwhile, a large swath of central Ontario is under snow squall watches and warnings. Forecasters say some areas could see up to 75 centimeters of snow by the end of the weekend. And Calgary police were kept busy overnight responding to dozens of crashes. Snowy, frigid conditions led to icy roads in parts of the city. Well, the numbers are in. Taylor Swift's Eras Tour in Toronto gave the city an epic economic boost. According to payment services provider Moneris, spending in downtown Toronto increased by 45% during the 10 days surrounding Swift's visit. Among the top spending trends, a 49% rise at clothing stores and a jump of 102% for accessory and specialty stores. Starbucks opened in a new location in South Korea that offers customers a rare view. The coffee giant is now open at an observatory overlooking the border with North Korea, about a kilometer away. Customers have to pass a military checkpoint to get in, but can then sip beverages while looking at a quiet North Korean mountain village. Local officials say bringing in Starbucks is part of its plan to develop the border area as a tourist destination. Still ahead, Notre Dame Cathedral is ready to reopen. The stunning restoration project of a 12th century masterpiece. The newly restored Notre Dame Cathedral in the heart of Paris was unveiled today, 5 years after a devastating fire. CTV's Garrett Berry gives us a look inside.
Soaring ceilings and spectacular stained glass, even statues back in their rightful place. You can see this statue, just like the church itself, is a miracle, said the chief reconstructionist, showing French President Emmanuel Macron around the restored building. In 2019, it was almost all lost. The iconic cathedral's roof and spire burst into flames. But in the past 5 years, more than 1,000 people have labored here, with almost $1 billion of donated funds from around the world to bring this cathedral back to life.
N'oubliez jamais que durant ces 5 années de votre vie,
never forget that during these last 5 years of your life, the French president said, you have all shared together, without question, the most beautiful project of the century. This transformation was closely watched in Canada too, not just by history lovers, but also by those charged with taking care of churches in this country.
We aspire to, be able to treat our history and heritage with the same kind of respect that they have in France.
The Basilica of St. John the Baptist, built in Newfoundland in 1855, is showing a bit of age now, and restoration work is getting underway, with a new owner charged to oversee the process.
How do you clean a place after it's been soaked and also coated in lead dust, and they sprayed latex on the walls and pulled off 800 years of grime? So we were watching the restoration techniques and we were enthralled.
Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral will be open to parishioners and to tourists next week. Garrett Berry, CTV News.
It truly is a work of art. That is our newscast for this Friday night. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. I'm Heather Butts. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.